Super. Right. So welcome, everybody. It's so lovely to see so many people. I'm Pennie Akehurst, and for the last 2 decades, I've had the privilege of working alongside leaders, practitioners, head teachers, and directors who are shaping the emotional learning climates of their settings. The work I do blends leadership, organisational culture, psychological safety, and the realities and challenges of working in the early years sector. I help teams to build cultures where adults feel safe enough to think, to question, to experiment, and to grow. I'm a systems leadership specialist, a consultant, a governor, and a board member. But what I'd really like you to know about me is that I'm someone who's endlessly curious about what helps people to work at their natural best. Today, I'm not here as a person with all the answers, as we're all at different stages of our leadership journey. But I do want to share with you some of the things that I've learned on my journey so far. I want to start by asking you something. Have you ever watched a child do something brave? It may have been something small, but it was really brave. And it left you thinking, if only you knew how ready you are. Well, today I want to offer you the same moment, that feeling of, I've got this, or I know what I need to do. Because whatever your circumstances, whether you're thinking about a leadership position or wondering if you're ready, or if you're new to leadership and feeling unprepared, or if you're looking for something that may help you to deal with your current leadership challenges, you are definitely more ready than you think. Most people imagine leadership to be something that begins the day that we're given a title: room leader, deputy manager, manager. It's as if someone taps us on the shoulder and passes over an imaginary baton. But leadership doesn't start with a title. Titles create positional authority, but they don't create leadership capability. That capability is built quietly over time, shaped by all the human interactions we have day in, day out. And whether you realise it or not, you've slowly been curating the knowledge, skills, behaviours, and even some of the answers to your leadership challenges, because the way that we work with young children demands it of us. Every time we tune into a child's cues, we're practicing emotional intelligence. Every time we scaffold and extend learning, we're practicing coaching and capacity building. Every time we act as a co-regulator, we're practicing creating psychological safety. And every time we observe and assess what children know, understand, and can do, we're practicing insight and decision-making. These things aren't small. They're the foundations of human-centered leadership. So today isn't about me imparting leadership nuggets or leaving you with pearls of wisdom, as the title to this session suggests. I think my role here today is more profound, because I want to help you to draw parallels between the work that you do as a practitioner and the work you do as a leader. I want to shine a spotlight on the transferable skills and the practices that naturally extend from the way that we work with children. I want to convince you that you know way more about leadership than you thought, because you've been developing a huge number of leadership skills, interaction by interaction, moment by moment, long before anyone offered you a title. So what I hope for this session is that it's going to provide you with a moment to pause, to reflect, and to recognise not only how ready you are, but how able you are. That self-awareness will stand you in good stead, because it will help you to see the bridge between the practitioner you were and the leader you are. Without that bridge, many leaders feel as though they've stepped into a role that requires a completely new set of skills. But the truth is, the skills that we built with children don't become redundant. They develop and evolve to meet the needs of the adults that we're working with. So here's a quick question for you. I'd like you to look at this slide. How many of these skills, the skills that we use in our work with children, do you think lay the foundations for how we support our adults? Just have a think for a moment. If you answered all of them, you'd be correct. We often find ourselves in leadership roles because we're good at what we do. We're promoted on the strength of our practice, but then step into a role where things can feel really alien because the work's very different. We suddenly find ourselves immersed in a world full of rotas, funding applications, portals, spreadsheets, and supervisions. The term used to describe that position is accidental management. And accidental management happens when an individual steps into a leadership role without deliberate preparation or a defined leadership framework to support them. It's found in most industries. However, I'd like to challenge that narrative because I don't think we're truly accidental managers in our sector. I think we're latent leaders. So what do I mean? Well, by the time we're considering a leadership position, we've already developed a significant proportion of our leadership skills, not through formal leadership training, but through the way that we work with children. We've honed a rich set of relational, observational, and responsive skills. We just haven't been shown how to apply them to a different context. So we don't need a completely new set of skills. What we need actually is someone to help us to reframe the ones that we've got. We're like sleeper agents in a spy movie who, once activated, have all of these incredible skills that we can unleash on the world. And here's the truth that we should be shouting from the rooftops. The people in our sector are uniquely placed to step from practitioner to leader because the heart of our work doesn't fundamentally change when we move from working with children to working with adults. Let that just sink in for a minute. Leadership would be a lot less daunting if everyone knew that the lion's share of our role as a leader is an extension of what we do with children, because both roles are about human growth. The connection between how we nurture children and how we support adults is far greater than we acknowledge. And in both cases, our role is to create the conditions in which people can flourish. We want children to grow and thrive so that they can navigate life beyond our settings with success. And we want our teams to grow and thrive so that they can consistently do their best work, their best thinking, and feel fulfilled. And once we see that, we can use what we know to develop approaches and systems that truly meet the needs of our people. We have a short time together today, so the number of examples I'm able to share with you will be limited. But the principles of the things that I'm going to share with you can be applied to a much wider range of our practice. And I'm going to start by talking about the characteristics of effective teaching and learning. I'd like to know how many of you have come across the term soft skills. Now, I can't see anybody at the moment. I can only see my screen, so I'm relying on my colleagues from Pen Green to tell me if there's lots of people that have come across that term or not. If you could give them a wave, if you could use your hands up signal, that would be really helpful.
I'll keep my eye on the chat as well.
Thank you. Thank you. How many of you have come across that? Give us a wave, use your hands up signal, whatever works for you.
2 people with hands up at the minute.
Okie doke. Okay.
3. Yeah, 4. I think people have found it. There we go.
There you go. Okay. So a few people then. Well, I think I need to start by saying I think it's a really rubbish name. Okay. I mean, for a start, they're not all skills. It's a catch-all term for a whole bag of mashings, as we'd say up north. A jumble of dispositions, behaviours, attitudes, personal characteristics. And yes, there are a few skills thrown in there for good measure. And secondly, there's absolutely nothing soft about them. They are complex, layered, deeply human capacities. They're tangled up with our emotions, our past experiences, our successes and setbacks, our self-awareness, and the parts of ourselves we'd sometimes rather keep tucked away. These so-called soft skills are the glue that holds everything together. They shape how we relate to one another. They're what we draw on when life is messy and complicated. They're the things that help us to navigate challenges, uncertainty, and change with some degree of steadiness. And we use them every single day in our relationships, in our decision-making, in how we cope, connect, and contribute. They are anything but soft. Now, the term itself might be new to some of you, but the concept won't be. You'll recognise them instantly when I say words like curiosity, concentration, perseverance, resilience, and self-regulation. In our work with children, we refer to them as the characteristics of effective teaching and learning, the human capacities that help us to learn, adapt, and thrive. The nature of our work with children means that we're ideally placed to understand just how vital these capacities are. We know it isn't enough to simply teach children stuff. Our role is to create the conditions, the climate, the relationships, and the experiences that allow children to develop the behaviours, attitudes, and dispositions that enable them to use what they know to make sense of the world around them and to make the most of whatever opportunities and challenges life sends their way. We live and breathe the characteristics of effective teaching and learning. But we also know that the characteristics have a symbiotic relationship with personal, social, and emotional development. Every day, we're creating a climate in which children can connect, find emotional security, and be supported to navigate the complexities of relationships. Our work with children also teaches us that those human capacities are fluid. We can't tick a box to say, Charlotte is now resilient, or Freddie will forevermore approach everything with a can-do attitude. They're not like learning to put on your coat, to tie your shoelaces, or mastering the skills you need to go to the loo. They can grow and regress. They can stagnate or simply fail to develop, depending on each child's experiences, interactions, and opportunities. And as we grow old, nothing about that changes. We continue to develop and refine these capacities in order to cope with whatever life sends our way. But the same rules apply in adulthood as they do in childhood. These so-called soft skills can still grow, regress, or stagnate, depending on the environments that we find ourselves in. Now, that's a critical fact for us to hold in mind as leaders, because these human capacities shape everyone's work every single day. How well developed they are will influence how individuals approach each decision, each interaction, and each task. They affect how people respond to a challenge, how they handle feedback, how they manage stress, how they communicate, how they collaborate, and how they contribute to the emotional climate of our team. So that raises an important question. Can we use what we know about the characteristics of effective teaching and learning and PSED as a basis for our work with adults? And the answer is absolutely. Firstly, we know that the emotional well-being of young children underpins every aspect of their development. When new children join us, we work tirelessly to create a sense of emotional security. We slow down, we listen and watch to understand, we tune in, offer predictable routines, and build trust through warm, responsive relationships. We understand that without these foundations, children are unlikely to explore or to take risks or engage in deep level learning. Adults are no different. If we want our people to speak openly, admit to mistakes, take professional risks, try new approaches, or stretch themselves, then we have to create the same conditions of emotional safety. Adults also need attunement, predictability, and relationships that communicate that you're safe here. When the environment feels psychologically safe, people are far more willing to think out loud, to problem solve collaboratively, and to engage in reflective practices. Now, we're going to come back to that term, psychological safety, a little bit later, so I'm going to stick a pin in it for now and just carry on for a minute. We know that children learn by doing, by trying, failing, and using their perseverance and determination until they achieve what they set out to do. Adults learn soft skills in exactly the same way. You can't tell somebody to be more resilient, more confident, or more approachable and expect things to change instantly. These capacities grow through experience, feedback, and supported reflection. And that means that the technical skills we learn through qualifications and courses such as observation and assessment practices, are not the only things that matter in conversations and interactions about performance. Yes, our people need to learn how to observe and assess what children know, understand, and can do. And of course, they need to know how our planning systems work. But equally, they need the ability to analyse what they've seen and heard, to interact with children in ways that nurture and encourage them, to be flexible and adaptable in the moment, to work collaboratively with their colleagues, and to be able to respond positively to change. When we nurture children's ability to think critically, make connections and solve problems, we strengthen their capacity to navigate life's complexities. If those skills haven't been fully developed in our adults, they see defensiveness instead of curiosity, a fixed mindset rather than an openness to feedback, bias instead of a willingness to examine assumptions, and hesitation instead of the confidence to make decisions when the road ahead isn't clear. These are not nice to haves. They're the foundations of effective professional practice. And if we expect adults to demonstrate these dispositions, then we have to recognise something really important, and that's that human beings don't magically acquire these capacities just because they've grown up. Principles that help children to thrive are the very ones that adults rely on too, which means that the way that we think about behaviour, emotion, and learning in childhood has just as much relevance in the staff room as it does the classroom. If soft skills are these deeply human capacities that shape how we cope, connect, and contribute, then we need to approach adult behaviour with the same curiosity that we offer to our children. So my first takeaway is this. If we only supported the 7 areas of learning and completely ignored the characteristics of effective teaching and learning, we'd have children that know lots of stuff, but found it really difficult to use and apply what they know. If we apply the same logic to our work with adults, we'd have a team of people that know and understand our policies, our procedures, our curriculum, and even our pedagogical approach, but who may not have the skills to be able to handle feedback, work collaboratively, problem solve, adapt to change, or communicate effectively. These deeply human capacities shape how children learn and how adults navigate life. So if we want to support staff's holistic development, we need to place just as much importance on soft skills as we do the technical skills that are required to do the job. The next part of our work that I'd like to explore is our approach to behaviour. And I'm going to make a bold statement. Well, I think it's a bold statement. And that is, behaviour is a form of communication, no matter how old we are. Is that a bold statement? Or is it something we know? And if it's something that we know, have we applied that thinking to all aspects of our work? We're taught in our studies to interpret children's behaviour through a lens of curiosity. We learn to look past the action to try to tune into the message that they're sending, and we do that for children all the time. The child who withdraws may be telling us that they're overwhelmed. The child who lashes out may be telling us that we're too close. The sudden outpouring of emotion, the refusals, the meltdowns, the child that clonks another one on their head with their favourite car, they're all communicating something. A need, a fear, a frustration, an insecurity. But somewhere along the way, as people grow taller, get jobs and wear lanyards, the world stops being curious about behaviour and starts to judge it instead. And we're all guilty of it because quite often those behaviours usually impact us in some way. I'd like you to think about a behaviour in your team that really frustrates you. I want you to hold that in mind for a second. And now I'd like you to type one word in chat that describes how that behaviour makes you feel. And could I ask Joe to have a look at, keep an eye on chat for me? So what kind?
No worries.
Thank you. How does that behaviour make you feel? We'll take the first few answers that come in.
So I've got frustrated, oh, 2 frustrated, 3
Yep.
frustrated.
Lots of frustration.
Yeah, 4 annoyed.
Yeah.
Another annoyed, angry.
Yeah.
Lots of annoyed coming in.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Agitated.
Those feelings happen to us all, right? You know, you're not alone, and you can see in chat as your colleagues are joining you in the things that they've written. You can see you're not the only one. Lots of similarity between the words that are being used. So
Frustrated and use swear words is the last one that's just come in.
So yeah, those feelings happen to us all. We might be leading a team meeting where we're desperately trying to introduce a new way of working, but Vera doesn't do change. She's firmly in the room of resistance, and she's asking some very, very difficult questions that have the potential to derail your meeting. And all you can think of is, why on earth can't you just ask something vaguely positive? You know, why do you have to deliberately look for problems? Or maybe you're in a supervision session, and despite your best efforts to develop a conversation, your team members' responses are short and clipped. So how's everything going? Yeah, it's fine. Have you been finding it in the toddler room? Yeah, it's been really good. Is there anything that would help you to feel more settled or more at home in that room? No, I don't think so. Okay. How are you getting on with your new key children? Yeah, really well. It's like trying to get blood out of a stone. Right now, there are leadership teams across the country that are struggling with some of the behaviours and attitudes they see in their teams. They are frustrated by those that don't seem to use their initiative or those that are silently compliant. They're angry with the new recruits that don't stay very long, and they're driven to boiling point by the lack of consistency, by those that do the bare minimum, and also the entitledness that's shown by some members of our teams. Some leaders have even become resentful of their teams because they give so much and regularly go above and beyond to care for their people. But those acts of kindness often seem to be taken for granted or become an expectation without any reciprocity. But maybe, just maybe, those behaviours are trying to tell us something important. What if the staff member that doesn't seem to use their initiative is actually afraid that if they ask without acting and get it wrong, they're going to end up in trouble? Maybe that hesitation or lack of action on their part is their way of expressing that fear. What if quiet compliance isn't passivity, but the only way that staff member can think of to communicate that they don't feel heard or valued, so they just plod on and keep their head down? Maybe the new staff member left our setting in the first few weeks of starting because they felt that they needed to protect themselves. Their sense of self-preservation kicked in because they witnessed people being unkind to each other or overheard a couple of members of staff talking disrespectfully about their colleagues or members of the leadership team. I mean, that's going to automatically make you think, well, what's to say they're not doing that behind my back? That's going to impact who you feel you can trust and how safe you feel. Could the lack of consistency be due to the fact that some members of our teams aren't clear about the expectations for some aspects of their work? Or maybe they didn't have a tailored induction, so there are gaps in knowledge and skills that they don't want to admit to because they've been working in the sector for a while. And what if entitledness is an indication that our culture isn't strong enough? Behaviour is never random. It's always rooted in something. It's shaped by environments, by invisible loads such as financial stress, caring responsibilities, health issues, neurodiversity, or a fear of failure. It can be used as a protection strategy. It can be shaped by past experiences, by lack of clarity or information, or by how safe we feel. These behaviours may be signalling unmet needs, unspoken worries, a lack of confidence, a stress response, or simply human beings doing the best that they can with the soft skills that they currently have. And that's why it's really important to respond to any behaviour that we see from our team with curiosity. Curiosity is one of the most powerful leadership capacities we have. It's a triple threat because it's a skill, it's an attitude, and it's a disposition. But it's also a choice. When we choose curiosity rather than judgment, we're saying, there's something here that I'm just not getting, or I don't understand yet. There's a reason this person's responding this way, or I need to explore this further. Curiosity helps us to see behaviour as communication rather than disinterest, defiance, or a problem to be solved. It helps us to connect. It helps our people to feel heard and seen, and it helps us to understand the messages that we're being given. This isn't about being soft. It's not about weak leadership. It's about meeting our people where they are, because, like it or not, how they show up every day is going to impact how much of themselves they're able to give to our children and their colleagues. So it's in everyone's best interest to take the time to respond with curiosity, care, and authenticity. So my next takeaway is this. Behaviour is always communication at every age. And when we respond with curiosity instead of judgment, just as we would if we were working with children, we uncover the needs, fears, or pressures sitting beneath the surface. As leaders, our job isn't to react to the behaviour we see, but to try and understand the message it's sending. Curiosity doesn't just help us to understand the behaviours and attitudes of our team. Being constantly curious lays the foundations for team growth. It creates a learning culture, and it helps to dispel one of the biggest myths of leadership, and that is, when you become a leader, you need to have all the answers. Some of the most incredible interactions I've observed over the years have been when adults and children have been learning together. And my favourite memory of all is a teacher that was working with a group of Year 2 pupils. They were sharing a book, and the teacher suddenly asked the child that was reading to stop because they'd come across a word that they hadn't heard before. Now think how powerful that is, to stop the whole class as a teacher and to have the confidence to say, "Man, there's a word here that I haven't come across before. Does anybody know what it means?" And when nobody did, okay, well, let's look it up and let's see what it means. And without hesitation, the children all reached for dictionaries and iPads. There was a genuine buzz of excitement around the room as they worked together in pairs or in small groups to try to be the first to find the new word. And that wasn't staged for my benefit. That was just a normal day in that classroom for a teacher who genuinely is committed to helping children to understand the importance of being a lifelong learner. We need to create environments where everyone can continue to learn and grow, adults and children alike. But when we step into a leadership role, many of us feel the burden of leadership and feel that we're going to be letting our teams down if we can't become the person who has all the answers. So we abandon the stance that we know works so well with children, and we adopt the role of a fixer, director, problem solver, and a decision maker in chief. The irony being that the very practices that we celebrate as high quality for children are exactly the practices that unlock ownership, autonomy, and motivation in adults. There's also an incredible amount of research in leadership texts that alert us to the dangers of leaders positioning themselves as the one who knows best. Those papers and journals warn us about bottlenecks in our work, about the creation of dependency cultures, of de-skilling our teams, and of leadership burnout. But the one that concerns me the most is that we start to dim the lights of our people. The consequence of having all the answers are that people stop thinking for themselves. And when they stop thinking, they just turn up and do what's required of them and go home. Motivation, passion, and commitment are slowly extinguished. When leaders create a culture where learning is championed, something different happens. Teams become more confident and more capable because they're encouraged to think, to try things out, to be creative, and to take calculated risks. Decision-making improves because more perspectives are invited into the room. Innovation increases because curiosity is treated as an asset, not a threat. People feel more able to ask for help, to say, I don't know, I don't understand, without fear of judgment. And leadership becomes more sustainable because we're no longer the ones that are carrying that impossible weight of being the go-to person for everybody. So my next takeaway is this for you. Some people would say that leaders don't need to have all the answers. I don't agree with that. I'd say we deliberately shouldn't have all the answers. Having a consistently curious stance not only helps us to understand the people in our teams more deeply, but it also builds a culture where learning is normalized and shared. When leaders champion learning rather than certainty, teams demonstrate ownership and autonomy. They learn at a faster rate because they're approaching a problem in a way that's meaningful for them. They are more collaborative and professional decision-making improves. But there's also another significant benefit, and that's that the provision doesn't grind to a halt if you take a much-needed holiday. Things don't fall apart when you step away because leadership is more sustainable. Next, I'd like to focus on leading with curiosity. So on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest and 1 being the lowest, how heavily does curiosity or being curious feature in the parts of your job that don't involve children? And I'm relying on Joe to look at people's cameras now if they can, or numbers in chat. If you could just tell me how many fingers you would be holding up if you're off camera. 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. How heavily does curiosity or being curious feature in the parts of your job that don't involve children?
Got 2, 3, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 5, 3.
Awesome.
2,
Thank
4.
you.
So right across the board.
Lovely, thank you. Well, I'll be honest and say that before I started studying leadership in more depth, I probably didn't feel that I had the time or the energy to be curious very often. But leading with curiosity has a significant impact on relationships, on communication, on confidence, on capability, and on workload, both yours and your teams. Leading with curiosity is at its heart a decision to treat other people, children and or adults, as critical thinkers, contributors and problem solvers. In early years research, sustained shared thinking, or SST, is widely recognised as the hallmark of high quality interactions. Drawing on the influential REPI study, Iram Siraj and colleagues describe SST as an episode in which 2 or more people working together in an intellectual way to solve a problem, clarify a concept, evaluate activities, and extend the narrative. It's sustained because the interaction continues beyond a brief exchange, and it's shared because all participants actively contribute to the thinking. I describe SST as those rich, absorbing moments when an adult and a child become genuinely engrossed in a line of inquiry. The adult follows the child's ideas with curiosity, uses open-ended prompts, wonders out loud, often offers possibilities, and helps the child to articulate and refine their thinking. Rather than leading the child to a predetermined answer, the adult and the child co-construct meaning, building ideas together in a way that deepens understanding, stretches language, and supports problem solving. These interactions are collaborative, reciprocal, and intellectually purposeful. Sustained shared thinking doesn't happen by accident, it depends on curiosity. Without curiosity, the interaction quickly becomes led or managed by the adult. The thinking closes down, but with curiosity, the thinking stays open and it develops and deepens over time. So when we lead with curiosity, we are essentially creating parallel conditions for professional growth. Instead of being, let's say, the fixer and taking control of the situation. It's no problem. I'll have a conversation with Nan when she comes to pick him up. We invite colleagues into shared problem solving. When Nan comes tonight, I'd really like you to provide the feedback. Would it be helpful to think together about what you might want to share? Rather than demanding compliance, for example, have you managed to complete that incident form for Ellie? We provide space for reflection. How did you get on completing that incident form for Ellie? Instead of directing improvements, you're going to need to do some work on your interactions, we begin with the staff members' strengths and insights. When did you feel your interactions were working really well with Harry and Charlie? What was happening in those moments? In each of those examples, the first approach closed the conversation down, whilst the second keeps things open. It draws on the same principles that sustain shared thinking: curiosity, reciprocity, co-construction, and respect for the other person's agency. Curiosity is what holds the conversation open long enough for thinking to develop. It resists the urge to close things down too quickly. It creates space for reflection, for contribution, and for shared understanding. But curiosity isn't just a technique. It's a value that makes a significant contribution to our culture. And sitting behind it is the belief that people are capable, thoughtful, and motivated to contribute meaningfully when they're given the conditions to do so. So my next takeaway message for you is this. Effective leadership practices build on conversations that start with a clear purpose, expand understanding through shared thinking, and end in action. And when leaders lead with curiosity, they create the same conditions for adults. Those conversations stay open long enough to deepen thinking, to clarify purpose, strengthen ownership, and lead to meaningful action. But leading with curiosity only works in environments that prioritise the emotional climates that we create for staff. We pay even close attention to the emotional climate we create for our children. We place a premium on secure attachments, high quality interactions, and routines and environments that support self-regulation and executive function. We go on courses that help us to understand how to support children to manage their big feelings and emotions. But by comparison, we invest a minuscule amount of time and energy in getting the emotional climate right for our adults. And yet we know deep in our bones that children struggle to learn when they're dysregulated. We know that behaviour, attention, curiosity, and perseverance all fall apart when children don't feel safe. But do we apply the same logic to the climate that we create for our adults? Adults also need environments in which they feel safe, they matter, and they belong. And when we create working environments where people feel emotionally secure, we create psychologically safe places, places where people can show up as themselves, take risks, and contribute fully without fear of embarrassment, judgment, or punishment. So let's unpick that term psychological safety in a bit more depth. Psychological safety is a shared belief across a team or organisation that it's safe to speak up, take risks, and be vulnerable without fear of embarrassment, rejection, or punishment. It creates environments in which all team members feel safe, that they matter, and they belong. Now, I know I'm shamelessly quoting myself there, so humblest apologies for that. This is an extract from an article that I wrote for Nursery World back in August last year, which explored psychological safety and its interplay with safeguarding. But there's much more to it than just having the confidence to speak out or to speak up. Psychological safety is shaped by how comfortable we feel taking interpersonal risks. Now, if that terminology is unfamiliar to you, it describes something that we do every single day. It's the moments we choose to make ourselves vulnerable in a social interaction. When we share an idea, when we share our emotions, a concern, or our perspective, even though there's a possibility of rejection, criticism, or negative consequences. These everyday behaviours all carry a social cost. Asking a question when you're unsure, challenging an idea or a decision, offering a different perspective, admitting to a mistake, giving honest feedback, asking for help. Each one requires us to trust that if we speak up, it's not going to lead to embarrassment, judgment, or punishment. And this is where leadership becomes absolutely pivotal, because it's down to us as leaders and managers to create the climate where people feel comfortable and confident to take these risks, because they know that nothing catastrophic is going to happen if they speak up or speak out. But here's the thing. Psychological safety isn't binary. People rarely feel fully safe or totally unsafe. Instead, they move up and down a continuum depending on the situation, the people present, the task, their previous experiences, the power dynamic, and the setting's culture. And that's why someone may contribute really confidently in one meeting, but fail to speak up in another. It's why a practitioner who seems really bubbly and outspoken in the staff room may be quiet or hesitant when they come to supervision. It's why really confident and competent practitioners lose the plot in inspections. And it's why new team members may appear disengaged when in reality they're just simply trying to work out, is this a safe place? And can I trust the people around me? This is why we need to build in regular opportunities for pulse checks across our setting to understand where psychological safety is sitting, how it's shifting, and what it's telling us about the lived experiences of our teams. Psychological safety isn't something we declare, it's something people feel. So when leaders say to me, oh yeah, every member of my team would have the confidence to speak up, let's say if there was a concern about a colleague, my response is always, how do you know? How do you know that to be true? Because each situation will be impacted by relationships, power dynamics, culture, confidence, and previous experiences, etc. And all of those factors are going to play a part in whether that person feels able to take that interpersonal risk. Think about the emotional climate that we create for children. We get down to the child's level, we tune in, we offer security and predictability. We build trust through warm, responsive relationships. We create spaces where children feel held, seen, and understood. Because of our approach, children feel safe enough to explore the environment around us. Again, adults are no different. We know that children thrive when they feel safe enough to explore. Well, adults thrive when they feel safe enough to contribute. We know that children need co-regulation before they can self-regulate. Adults need relational steadiness and stability before they can take interpersonal risks. We know that children need warm, responsive interactions to build confidence. Adults need warm, responsive leadership to build trust. The parallels are striking, and once we see them, we can't unsee them. But I also need to bust some myths. So psychological safety is not about being nice or being nicer. It's not about avoiding challenge or lowering expectations. It's not about wrapping our people in cotton wool, stroking people more, or pandering to whims. It's not about always having nice biscuits in the staff room or treating staff to pizza when they're staying late for a team meeting. It's about creating a climate where people can do their best thinking because they're not investing energy in trying to protect themselves. When psychological safety is low, our people play small, they stay quiet, they avoid using their initiative, they hide mistakes, they keep their heads down, they do the bare minimum. And all of those things happen because the cost of doing more feels too high. And that's got some really worrying implications for safeguarding, if nothing else. When psychological safety is high, people step forward, they step up, they share ideas, they ask questions, they challenge respectfully, they take ownership, they collaborate, they innovate, and they stretch themselves, all because the environment's telling them it's safe to do so. But here's the part that's quite often misunderstood about psychological safety. It's not built through grand gestures. It's built through micro moments. It's built when a leader says, "Thank you for raising that. I hadn't thought of it that way." It's built when someone admits to a mistake and the response is, "I really appreciate your honesty. Let's work through that together." When somebody asks for help and it's met with, "Of course, what do you need?" It's built when someone challenges an idea and leaders respond with curiosity rather than defensiveness. It's built when feedback is given with care, clarity, and respect. And it's also built when leaders model vulnerability, when they say, "I don't know," or "I'm really sorry I got that wrong," or "Bear with me, I'm still learning." These moments accumulate. They become the emotional climate of our team. They tell people whether this is a place that they can show up fully or whether they need to hold parts of themselves back. Just like with children, the emotional climate that we create for adults is not a luxury because people can't learn, contribute, or thrive when they're busy trying to keep themselves safe. It's a prerequisite for honesty, for trust and growth. If we want our teams to be reflective, resilient, collaborative, and committed, then we need to create climates where they feel psychologically safe. Climates where interpersonal risk-taking isn't just tolerated, but it's welcomed, where curiosity is valued more than perfection, and where mistakes are seen as opportunities to learn rather than evidence of incompetence. Psychological safety is the soil in which professional growth takes root. As leaders, we're the gardeners. We shape the climate through our words, our tone, our responses, our behaviours, our expectations, and our presence. We shape it through the way that we handle conflict, the way we give feedback, the way that we listen, and the way that we show up, even when things are hard. When we get the emotional climate right for adults, everything, and I mean everything, becomes easier. Conversations deepen, relationships strengthen, practice improves, teams become more cohesive. And the most significant thing is that children benefit because adults who feel safe are adults who can offer safety. So my takeaway on psychological safety is this. The emotional climates that we create for adults are just as vital as the ones that we so carefully craft for our children. Whilst we instinctively understand that children can only learn, explore, and take risks when they feel safe, many leaders don't apply the same logic with consistency to their teams. Adults also need environments where they feel secure, valued, and able to take interpersonal risks without fear of judgment or consequences. This is the essence of psychological safety, the everyday freedom to ask questions, admit mistakes, offer ideas, challenge respectfully, and to ask for help. And we all have the capacity to do this, but our success will depend largely on our ability to answer 4 key questions for each member of staff. And they are, am I safe? Do I matter? Do I belong? And am I accepted? My next example is about finding out what our staff know, understand, and can do. Now, in the early years, we pride ourselves on the way that we welcome children, new children, into our setting. Those first few days and weeks are intentionally designed to help children to feel safe, seen, and understood. We don't rush to teach. We begin by building a relationship and creating a baseline that honours who they are and what they bring. Our settling in practices are rooted in curiosity and respect. We observe, we listen, we talk with families, and we notice the small but significant cues that help us to understand a child's strengths, interests, and emerging needs. This isn't a checklist exercise, it's a relational process that allows us to meet every child where they are. If we applied the same thinking to adults who join our team, our induction process would look and feel very different. Instead of starting with, this is how we do things around here, we'd begin with a, tell me about you approach. We'd take the time to understand each person's starting points, their knowledge, their experience, their values, their beliefs, their habits, their assumptions, and the professional cultures that have shaped them. In other words, we'd create an adult equivalent of a settling in period, one that's responsive, relational, and intentionally attuned to the individual. Adults, just like children, arrive with an uneven profile of knowledge, skills, and experiences. And if we don't take the time to understand their starting points, we risk building an induction around what we think they need rather than what they actually need. And that has the potential to cause them some real problems a little bit further down the road when aspects of practice aren't meeting our expectations or standards. It's critical that inductions help new team members to understand what we do, how we do it, and why. But it's equally important to tailor each induction to real gaps in knowledge and skills. Otherwise, a person may be struggling to meet the requirements of their role. A generic induction might seem efficient in the short term, but it can often leave people floundering, overwhelmed, or even worse, quietly masking what they don't yet know. And I think this matters even more in a world where recruitment challenges are the norm rather than the exception. The uncomfortable truth is that I've had countless conversations with leaders and managers across the country who've shared that the pool of candidates they're selecting from is often very sparse. But because they're so desperate to fill a post, they quite often end up recruiting someone who wouldn't have even been shortlisted in years gone by. Now, please don't misunderstand me, that isn't a criticism of those individuals. It's a reflection of the sector's landscape. When the labour market is tight, we inevitably welcome people with more varied backgrounds, less experience, or gaps in foundational knowledge. But that makes it even more critical that we put an approach in place that reduces assumptions. For example, just because somebody's worked somewhere else before doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to know how to do A, B, and C. We need to ensure that foundational knowledge and skills are secure. Does the staff member have the depth of knowledge that we need around child development, the 7 areas of learning, the characteristics of effective teaching and learning, child protection, etc.? We need to ensure a shared understanding. Does the staff member actually understand what's in our policies? And are they able to use and apply that knowledge when needed? And what are we doing to help them to retain that knowledge? We can't assume that the person stepping into the role has had the benefit of high quality modelling, mentoring, or professional culture in their previous setting. Or that the depth of knowledge that our people have is actually what we need from their qualifications. And again, that's not a criticism of our staff, it really isn't. It's a reflection of unprecedented amounts of change, a lack of standardisation, competing priorities, and also political expediency. But what we can do is apply the same principles that we use with children. We can start with what they already know, understand, and can do. We can identify what's emerging and make plans to enhance knowledge and skills where it's needed. We can notice what's missing and think about the appropriate sequencing of professional development opportunities. We can also respond with intentional support that meets real need. This isn't about lowering expectations. It's not about extending induction periods. It's about recognising that if we really want our children and our staff to thrive, we have to meet them where they are. And from there, we can build on what they know, understand, and can already do. A well-designed induction becomes the adult equivalent of a settling in period. It's time to build trust, to understand the culture of our setting, to learn the routine, and to develop the confidence to participate fully. When we get it right, we don't just fill gaps in knowledge, we strengthen soft skills, we build psychological safety, and we lay the foundations for reflective, resilient practice. And in a sector where every member of our staff contributes to the emotional climate of our setting, that investment pays dividends far beyond the first few weeks in post. So here's my next takeaway for you. Just as we take time to understand each child's starting points, we should apply the same relational, curiosity-driven approach to the adults joining our teams. Children and adults alike arrive with uneven profiles of knowledge, skills and experiences. And if we don't intentionally discover what new staff members already know, understand and can do, we can risk designing inductions based on assumptions rather than reality. When induction is personalised, relational and responsive, it strengthens confidence, psychological safety and reflective practice. It better prepares the staff member for their new role, and ultimately it enhances the emotional climate and the quality of our whole setting. And my final point for tonight then, I want to share one of the most profound things or truths, I guess, that I've learned about leadership. And that is, we don't tell people who we are, we show them. We understand this instinctively when we work with our little ones. Children don't learn who we are because we announce we're patient or kind or trustworthy. They learn it through first-hand experiences. We're calm and kind when they're dysregulated. We're grounded and gentle when they're overwhelmed, and we're trustworthy when they're unsure. They learn who we are through the consistency of our presence, not by what we say. And there are no surprises that the same is true for adults. You know, we can talk about vision, values, teamwork, and psychological safety. So we're blue in the face, but our teams will form their conclusions about us based on what we do in the moments that matter. They watch how we respond when something goes wrong. They notice whether we listen when they speak. They pay attention to how we handle pressure, conflict, and uncertainty. They observe whether our expectations apply to everyone or only some. These micro moments, probably ones that we barely even register, are the moments that tell people who we are. And here's the part that I really wish I'd have known, somebody had told me a lot earlier in my leadership journey. Your team is constantly gathering information and data about you. And not in a cynical way, but in a human way. They're trying to work out, can I trust you? Are you consistent? Do you mean what you say? Is it safe to be honest with you? And will you have my back when it counts? Just like children, adults learn through lived experience, not stated intentions. We can say, I'm here for you if you need me, but if people are met with impatience and when they need help, they'll stop coming. We can say mistakes are part of learning, but if our tone shifts when someone makes one, they'll hide it next time. We can say I value your ideas, but if we interrupt or dismiss people, then they're going to stop offering them. Leadership isn't a set of declarations, it's a set of behaviours. And those behaviours, especially the small and unguarded ones, shape the emotional climates of our team far more than any policy, poster, or staff meeting ever will. Here's the best part, and I want you to really hear this. You already know how to do this. You've been doing it for years with children. You've modelled calm when children are overwhelmed. You've offered reassurance when they're unsure. You've shown consistency, warmth, and attunement in thousands of tiny moments that have helped children to feel safe enough to explore, learn, and grow. Leadership is simply the extension of some of those practices applied to adults. When we show up with curiosity, steadiness, and authenticity, we create climates where people feel safe enough to contribute. When we model vulnerability, we give permission for people to be human. When we follow through on what we say, we build trust. When we treat people with dignity, especially in hard or challenging moments, we show them who we really are. And when we do that with consistency, something extraordinary happens. People rise. They think more deeply. They collaborate more openly. They take more ownership, and they bring more of themselves to work every day, and they grow. So my last takeaway is this. Leadership isn't defined by what we say, but by who we constantly show ourselves to be. Just as children learn who we are through our calm, our steadiness, our attunement, Adults form their understanding of us through those micro moments, the everyday behaviours that reveal our values far more loudly than a statement or a slogan. And because those moments shape the emotional climates of our team, we need to lean intentionally and unapologetically into the very skills that we use with children. Our curiosity, our presence, our ability to co-regulate, to listen, to notice, and to respond with humanity. When we bring the same capacities into leadership, we create the conditions in which adults feel safe enough to bring their whole selves to work. And when we can do that, our people will truly flourish. So as we come to the end of our time together, I just wanted to leave you with something that sits at the heart of everything that we've explored today. Throughout this session, we've drawn parallels between the way that we nurture children and the way that we support adults. We've talked about curiosity, psychological safety, behaviour as communication, and the emotional climates that we create for teams. But woven through all of that is a truth that I think sometimes is forgotten. And that is that leadership is profoundly human work. We all pride ourselves in knowing our children deeply. We notice the tiny things. The way George sits and wiggles in his chair when he needs to go to the loo, the way Isabel twiddles with her hair when she's thinking, and that Jack will just come and sit quietly beside us when he's had a bit of a setback. Those observations aren't accidental. They're products of attunement, patience, and genuine interest in who each child is. And the same qualities, the very same ones, are what allow us to understand, support, and elevate the adults that we work with. Leadership isn't about holding all the answers. It isn't about perfection or authority. Leadership is about presence. It's about how we show up in the moments that matter. But you already know that because you instinctively do it with children. So if you've ever doubted yourself, if you've ever wondered whether you're ready, if you've ever felt like you've stepped into a role that demands a completely new version of you, I want you to hear this clearly. You are absolutely more ready than you think. Leadership isn't something you step into. It's something you've been quietly building moment by moment, interaction by interaction for years. Thank you for listening.